NFC South is next in your spreadsheet here, Sam. Let's go Atlanta Falcons. We're cranking through it, man. We're not even going to have no conversation, no talking, just get down to business.
We can do tight shows. What's the problem?
We're an eighth of the way there, Sam. We'll see how it goes.
Atlanta defensive line still. I was trying to work out whether it's more acute on the edge than it is on the interior, and ultimately I think they just still need the whole thing. Edge rusher at least has, or interior rather, at least has more of the bodies that they drafted last year when they just spammed defensive line after passing up on one to draft Michael Penix Jr. at the top of the draft. But, you know, can you rely on any of the players they drafted last year, right? Braylon Trice, and injuries were a huge part in not seeing anything from the last year, so I don't want to write them off. But the point is, when you haven't seen anything from a bunch of young guys, going into year two, it's really hard to then rely on them as the thing that's going to be better this year. But like Brandon Dorlus, Rook Orororo, and Braylon Trice, three guys that they drafted last year, basically didn't see anything in a massive positive way from any of them. So, you know, you've got David Onyemata there, you've got Morgan Fox, you've got some bodies, but I think they would really like to upgrade any of those. On the edge, you've got Leonard Floyd, who they brought over as like a stopgap. You've got Arnold Ebiketie, who hasn't, you know, really developed, and then you've got Braylon Trice, etc. The whole defensive line, I think, is still an option.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, take your favorite offensive lineman at pick 15, maybe trade down. I mean, defensive lineman, trade down, maybe even still get your favorite defensive lineman. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, I think, is in the mix. Mike Green, James Pierce, some of the guys we like, Ezaraku, who we mentioned. So if you're going edge, I know Falcons fans, you're just like, oh, we've drafted all the edges through the years. Did they get Charles Harris? No, they Tack McKinley, Vic Beasley. There was one other in there, right? That it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the moves Thomas Dimitroff made in the first round and whether or not they worked. You need to go edge. But if you want to go defensive tackle and it's a Walter Nolan or it's a Kenneth Grant, or I'm fine with all that. But I think it's a double up, man. I think it's a double up on the D line type of world for Atlanta. I think we did that in their mock draft the other day. And if you add those two plus the three draftees from last year, then it feels like, oh, look at this youth infusion on the defensive line. You might even get some comparisons to what the Rams did, which was 4 draft picks on the D-line in 1 year to essentially try to replace Aaron Donald. And it kind of worked. By the end of the year, they were looking good. So you might get Raheem Morris thinking, hey, we need to replicate that for the Falcons.
Yeah. Other needs, you know, do they need a new center after Drew Dahlman left in free agency? I would think they would probably like competition for that spot rather than just handing it over. And then what else did I have? Cornerback too. Like, do you trust Mike Hughes? He had a pretty good year last year, and he has, you know, former high draft pick pedigree, et cetera, but he has a lot of bad tape in his NFL career before that, you know, surprisingly productive season last year for the Falcons. That's another one of those ones where you can either see that as like, oh, look what we found, like this gem, this hidden diamond in the rough, or you can be like, is that going to happen again? You know, do we actually want to find a better player here? So I would be looking for another starting corner as well.
Yeah, it can even be a developmental type of guy that, you know, they did sign Hughes for a couple of years, but just to have the depth and the extra look, middle of the second round, if you're picking 40 between picks 32 and 45, I will keep repeating the quarterbacks who got hurt, who have first round talent, Benjamin Morrison, Shavon Ravel, if those guys are there. I think that's one of the stories of the draft. I might mention that for 4 or 5 different teams here. Falcons, those are their needs and some options. Let's go Carolina Panthers now.
Carolina Panthers still need,
it's going to be all pass rush.
Defensive line.
All pass rushers. Yeah.
Yeah, though I think you can argue they still need wide receiver 1. Like, unless you think Xavier Legette is going to become that guy, I think you can argue they still need that alpha passing target. They've got good receivers, but they have depth receivers, right? Adam Thielen is still good, although reaching the end. Jalen Coker looks like a real find, but not as a number 1. They have passing weapons, but they don't have that number 1 guy unless Legette becomes that guy. After that, or, you know, alongside that, then yes, it's still defensive line.
So let's start on the D line there. They're picking at 8. I think that's right around the spot where all the pass rushers are intriguing, but have a question, right? A question mark, whatever it might be. I think all those guys are in play. Jalen Walker or Mykel Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Like any of those names are in play. Mike Green, James Pierce. Would they be able to trade down? I don't know if anybody – it's not a great spot for teams to trade up. I think that's right around when you start to run out of some of the blue chip players. But take your favorite defensive lineman there at 8 and then, maybe hit receiver on the turn in the second round.
It's not a great spot to trade down unless, the thing with those defensive line guys is like each one of them has some kind of thing, like red flag, if you like, that's a little bit scary. And it's kind of like pick the thing you're least scared of and draft that guy, right? That's sort of how I think of that group in that area. Pick the thing that you have the fewest concerns about, whether it's sample size, whether it's unusual body type, whether it's small school, whether it's off field, whatever the thing is, and just draft that guy, and that's your best shot. If you don't like that, there's a chance that there's a team out there, picking lower down that loves this guy, right? I'm not scared at all by the thing that you're scared of, whether it's size, whether it's sample size, whatever. That team is a trade partner, potentially, right? So while you might be scared of all the red flags and be like, man, I wish we could pick lower down, there might be a team out there who goes, I don't care if this guy only rushed the passer 350 times. Let's go, right? And wants to trade up for a Jalen Walker at that spot. So maybe it's not a good trade spot. On the other hand, I could see that being the perfect place for a team that really wants the right edge rusher and sees him available there.
Jalen Walker is going to be one of the biggest wild cards in the draft. Some people have him in the top 5, close to Abdul Carter, maybe an Abdul Carter light. Other people see him as a late first into the second. They worry about the inexperience, the two-position versatility that, didn't have him majoring in one thing, and maybe that's some risk. So I think Jalen Walker, one of the biggest wild cards on draft night. In that second round, though, I think we gave them Trey Harris the other day. I think we had a little bit of a run on receivers in the second round. If that doesn't happen in real life, though, they might have their choice of some of the pretty good, top 5-ish type of receivers. If they fall and they're available in the second round, I think Carolina might have a chance there. Don't forget, the Panthers in the second round, they gave up their second rounder. So the Bears are picking with their second rounder closer to the top of the second round. The Panthers have the Rams second round pick, so they're picking closer to the bottom there. But I think receiver could have good value there in the second. If Jaden Higgins is still there, your guy Jalen Royals is still there, I think they have some pretty good options there to add some weapons for Bryce Young.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. Yeah, and then I think the other spot is linebacker. I think you mentioned that recently, that somebody to play next to Josie Jewell, I think would be a good thing for them.
Schlesinger, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, Schlesinger from UCLA. Both of those guys are the most common round 2 options as far as linebacker goes. Look at that. This isn't fixing every team, but it's giving some suggestions, giving some player suggestions. New Orleans Saints, Sam, biggest needs here heading into the draft for the Saints.
New Orleans Saints. I mean, quarterback is the intriguing thing because Derek Carr is still there. He's obviously not the long-term future. You've also got Spencer Rattler from a year ago, but is that a need? Defensive interior, I think, is their biggest need on that defensive line. I actually kind of like. People say edge all the time. I actually think their starters are fine, right? Granderson and Chase Young. It doesn't feel amazing because Granderson is a sort of classic underappreciated edge rusher, and Chase Young, I think, is a little bit maligned because of what we thought he should be as opposed to what he's become. And admittedly, like, injuries have been an issue for him, so there's a question mark there as well. But if you get a healthy season from Chase Young like you did last year, and you have Granderson and you still have a little bit of depth there, I'm okay with edge. Interior, though, there's nobody that's making an impact right now. Like Brian Brzee has not developed yet into any kind of impact playmaker. They need a defensive tackle. I think they can make a real difference.
Yeah, and they've struggled, right, with Brzee in the first, on the edge with Isaiah Foskey in the second. They've struggled with some of their picks in recent years. Of course, you can go back further to Peyton Turner. Only got the 4 years out of Marcus Davenport in the first round. So I know that might give Saints fans a little PTSD, like, oh no, we can't go defensive line again in the first, but you kind of have to, I think. So I think all those big-bodied nose tackles are in play for the Saints. Would love, because Brzee, I know he can rush the passer a little bit, Sam. His problem is run game has been an issue all the way back to Clemson, holding the point, playing the run. I think he could rush the passer a little bit, right? And if you just put him into that role, if you can get a Kenneth Grant, maybe later it's a Deion Walker, one of the big 320 to 350 pounders available in this draft, I think that could help free up Brzee just a little bit. I think they're also hoping Devon Godshaw does some of that, even though, he's an okay nose tackle presence here.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think it is only a little bit. Like he still plays, far too upright, and he'll get some pressure, but he's too easy to just knock by the quarterback and keep on his pathway. Like, he's not for a first round type of pick. He's just not an impact player for them.
So, yeah, that's why I'm saying I think the 330, 340 pounders are all good. Cornerback is the other one. I think starting corner for the Saints. So much like we talked about, did we give them Trey Amos? I forget who we gave them in the second round, but we had that discussion about all the second round corners. I think that would be great back-to-back years of maybe if you could get Kool-Aid McKinstry last year in the second, pick your favorite second round available corner. I think you might have something there if you're the Saints.
And then I think you can make a case that like 3 or 4 of the 5 offensive line spots could use, a succession plan or an upgrade or, an immediate starter right now. Like, I think the offensive line needs work on it still.
So I like all those fits for all those options for the Saints. I would maybe attack some of that offensive line in the second round or beyond. You can't pick everybody in the second round, but the Saints could be in the mix for Arante Ursary, tackle from Minnesota, if they do want to have, because Trevor Penning heads into the last year of his deal. Ryan Ramczyk, we're kind of eliminating. If you want Ursary to maybe step in 2026 as the starting right tackle, you could play that game or go with the developmental offensive line option a little bit later in the draft. Let's round out the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Bucs, a team we've talked about. They've got pretty good depth right now. So what are we looking for the Bucs?
Yeah, they do. I think they could use an edge rusher still. Like, Hassan Reddick is signed, but he's on a 1-year deal. And the way last year went, I don't know how confident you can be in what you're going to get out of Reddick this year. Yaya Diaby, I think, is their best pass rusher at this point, on the edge at least. So I would definitely like to see an edge rusher added to them. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the first round. At some point, they need to plan for a future beyond Levante David, even though he seems to show no sign of ever stopping. And then, maybe they need a left guard, but it's a pretty good roster. It's not too many holes.
Yeah, I know we've said this on a few different shows, but I love the Jihad Campbell fit for the Bucs because good all-around 3-down linebacker, blitzes really well. Some people love him maybe even as a third-down pass rusher, edge rush type of presence. Great fit for Todd Bowles and what he likes to do, and I think the best all-around linebacker in the draft here. So if they went linebacker in round 1 with Campbell, I think he's the one linebacker that probably deserves to go round 1. I think that would be a great fit. As far as edge goes, I could see the Shamar Stewart fit there, as the explosive upside edge rusher who's got a little bit of development time because of the depth that they've built there. Braden Swinson, who you mentioned a bunch in the second-round mix during our mock draft the other day out of LSU. Swinson could be there as well. And then if you just want if you want almost like a Hassan Reddick type of clone, Princely, Uman Mielen from Ole Miss does that as well, right? Just designated pass rush type, doesn't play the run great. He's in that Hassan Reddick, Brian Burns type of mold. And I think that would be another way to just add a pass rush presence and complements Braswell, who they drafted who's more of an early down type of edge, drafted in the second round last year. I think Princely's a nice fit there for the Tampa Bay Bucs.
They were one of the teams where when you do this and you kind of look through, like some teams you look through and you're like, man, quite a lot of needs on this roster. There's a few others where you look through and you're like, wow, this roster is actually in pretty good shape. Now, maybe the issue is there's a lot of good players, not a lot of great players. And that might be why you run into a wall, or the quarterback is good, not great. But like Tampa Bay's roster is in pretty good shape. Yeah,
and when I'm looking at needs too, I'm looking at not just players that are there for 2025. How many players are tied up for multiple seasons? And when you do that, when you have you have your starters in place, then you can go into the draft, and it doesn't matter what your needs are. You just draft the best players. It's always the best way to go.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.